Hello and welcome to another episode of Rugby 9-4. Today we're going to be talking about my England Rugby World Cup Squad predictions and who I would be taking if I was in Eddie Jones's shoes. If you haven't watched the first part of my Rugby World Cup series, I recommend you check it out. It will act as a primer for this episode and may help you get an idea of what your national coach may be considering. Before we get into England selections, I'm going to give some context on how I picked the squad. I only chose from players that I feel have a reasonable chance of being selected by Eddie Jones, so there won't be many wild cards. I will also be structuring the squad around a 17-14 split, as I feel that is what Eddie Jones is most likely to go with. Also, for every position I've selected a player who Eddie should have on speed dial, just in case somebody in that position gets injured. So let's get started with loosehead. The guys who are going to be fighting it out will be Mako Vunipola, Ellis Genge and Ben Moon, with Joe Marler being an outside chance if he comes out of retirement. For me, this is a position where England lack depth but have a couple of seriously talented players. Mako Vunipola is obviously going to be on the plane and will be first choice. He's easily England's best all-round loosehead and potentially even the best in the world. His carrying and handling is critical to England playing well, and they are a lesser team without him. Backing him up, I think Ellis Genge will go. Ellis is probably the most destructive carrying loosehead around at the moment, and could be a real weapon coming off the bench, and is more than capable of slotting in if anything happened to Mako. Outside of those two, Ben Moon will certainly be in contention, and although he is a good quality scrummager and works hard, I'm not sure he is dynamic enough to get himself on the plane. That said, he will be the guy who is on speed dial in Eddie's phone if Mako or Ellis gets injured. Now, if Joe Marler is open to coming out of retirement, then I would be taking him as a third loosehead and a cover tight head. If not, then I would leave it at Vunipola and Genge and bring three tight heads. As for hookers, there are plenty of options but only a couple with much experience. Jamie George, Dylan Hartley, Luke Cowan-Dickie and Jack Singleton are going to be competing for the likely three places available. The first man on the plane will be Jamie George. He has made the England hooker shirt his own after the last year or so, and he adds some extra dynamism to what is normally a power front row. Second on the plane will be Luke Cowan-Dickie. His hard carries and defence are a massive asset and add momentum coming off the bench. However, some of his throwing has been a little suspect in an England shirt, but I don't think that will damage his chances too much. Now, a little controversially, I think Jack Singleton will make up the last spot. He has a solid all-round game, picks great lines, and has a good throwing percentage. He is technically uncapped, but he has played against the Barbarians a couple of times. As for Dylan Hartley, he may well be the most unfortunate player in recent memory. His injuries came at exactly the worst time, and I don't think it's wise to bring a player who hasn't played much at all in the last year, even if they are your best leader. That said, if he can get fit in time, he would be the guy I'd have on speed dial in case one of the other hookers went down. On to the tight heads. Again, like loosehead, I think this is a weaker position in terms of depth for England. Kyle Sinclair, Dan Cole and Harry Williams are going to be contending for three places, assuming Marler doesn't come out of retirement. Kyle Sinclair will almost certainly be the first guy on the plane. His carrying and handling are the best amongst English tight heads, and he seems to have the bite that Eddie seems to like. His temper and a rumoured hamstring injury will be concerns, but that won't prevent him going. Next up will be Harry Williams. Williams is a good all-round player and has slowly been building caps over the last couple of years. Whilst he may not be as flashy as Sinclair, he has a massive work rate and will provide a good option to rotate with. Lastly is Dan Cole. Cole is a stalwart in the England shirt, having amassed 85 caps, playing in 2 Lions tours and 2 previous World Cups. He is still England's best scrummaging tight head, and his jackling can still be an asset. His discipline and handling will be a concern, but that is outweighed by his greatest asset, which is his resilience. He has played nearly constantly for the last 2 to 3 seasons, with very few injuries at all. In a World Cup schedule that is particularly rough for England, that could be worth its weight in gold. As for reserves, I actually think if a tight head goes down, then Ben Moon will be called up to cover both sides. Into the locks, and this may be England's strongest position. Maro Itoje, George Cruz, Joe Launchbury, Courtney Laws and Charlie Ewells will be going toe-to-toe for the probable 4 spots in the squad. Maro Itoje is guaranteed to be going. Not only is he a top draw lock, but his ability to cover blindside is also a massive asset. Likewise, Courtney Lawes will also be on the plane for the same reason, as well as his bone-crunching hits. Joe Launchbury will make up the third spot due to his immense work rate and leadership, as well as his experience. The last spot will probably go to George Cruz. His partnership with Itoje for Saracens has been as good as ever this season, and his line-out calling is a real asset. The only concern will be the fact that he has made crucial errors while under pressure in both the Premiership and Champions Cup finals. Charlie Ewels is likely to miss out initially, but will be on speed dial in case of an injury. He's had a quality season for Bath, cementing himself in their first 15, competing against the likes of Dave Atwood and Luke Charteris. He is just unfortunate that he plays in such a competitive position. On to blindside flankers. There are only two guys left fighting it out for this shirt, Mark Wilson and Brad Shields. Mark Wilson has made the England shirt his own since last autumn. His tenacious defensive work rate is exactly the kind of thing that Eddie Jones will be looking for. Added to that, he has the ability to play across the back row. The fact that Newcastle got relegated shouldn't negatively impact his chances at all. As for Brad Shields, I think even though he hasn't really shown his Hurricanes form in an England or Wasps shirt as of yet, his ability to cover across the back row, as well as lock, should be a real asset, and Eddie seems to be very fond of him. They will both likely be on the plane to Japan. As for who will be in reserve on the blind side, I suspect it may be Alex Donbrandt. Donbrandt has had a breakthrough season at Quins and was massively impressive in the most recent Barbarians game. Even though he only has one senior professional season under his belt, his aggressive carrying and positional flexibility will see him ahead of the likes of Don Armand and Michael Rhodes. As for open side, England have a couple of good options available to them. Sam Underhill, Tom Curry and Lewis Ludlam will all be competing for two spots. First guy on the plane will be Sam Underhill. He is a destructive tackler and is competent over the ball, as well as a good link player. His injury record may be a concern as he has struggled to string together more than a handful of games. With that in mind, the second guy on the plane is likely to get a fair amount of game time, and the obvious choice is Tom Curry. He played a blinder in the Six Nations, especially in the game against Ireland. His jackling is probably slightly superior to Underhill's, although his discipline is slightly worse. The options behind Underhill and Curry aren't perfect. Ludlam isn't very experienced, especially in a position like open side, and that may force Eddie to even consider calling up somebody like Chris Robshaw if an open side goes down. Lastly for this video will be number 8. Billy Vunipola is easily the number 1 choice and likely the only guy on the plane as a purpose number 8. England's game hits another level when they can call upon Vunipola's carrying. His defence is also impressive, even making a couple of intercepts towards the end of the season. Behind him it's hard to call who is going to be on speed dial. Ben Morgan has probably been the next best 8 in the Premiership this season, but has been outside the England setup for a long while. Nathan Hughes had been Vunipola's backup for a long time, but now seems to be out of favour after some lacklustre performances in South Africa. If it was up to me, Morgan would be on speed dial, but I think Eddie may revert back to Hughes if anything happened to Vunipola. As for my own personal selections, the only change I would make is swapping Brad Shields out for Chris Robshaw. Personally, I think Robshaw should be ahead of Shields due to his massive experience and leadership qualities. I also believe he has been in a richer vein of Premiership form this season when compared to Shields. Well, that wraps up part 2 of this series. Let me know in the comments down below if you disagree with my predictions and who you would be taking instead. If you are enjoying this series, then give the video a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, then hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.